All right, diving in today, we've got a fascinating story to unpack. The journey of Morgan Rogers, a rising football star. We're going to be looking at a recent interview he gave, trying to figure out what it tells us about talent, about development, about carving your own path in the world of pro football.
It's interesting, Roger's story, it isn't just raw talent, is it? It really makes you think about how much does the environment, how much does coaching really have an impact on where a player ends up? Is someone like Rogers destined to be great wherever he plays? Or is he a product of the specific, situations he's found himself in?
Okay, so let's rewind all the way back to the beginning. Rogers has talked about playing with older age groups, like since he was 6. What does that do to a young player, that kind of early challenge?
Oh, it's got to be a huge factor. I mean, think about it. You're constantly playing against bigger, faster, more experienced kids. You got to adapt quickly or you get left behind, right? It's like a crash course in skill development.
It's not just natural talent. It's like being thrown into the deep end and figuring out how to swim. Now, Rogers had a mentor early on, a guy named Paul Tate, who was kind of a legend in the Birmingham City youth system.
Yeah, Paul Tate, real grassroots hero. It's interesting, though, because despite that connection, Rogers actually ended up joining West Brom's academy instead. Seems his dad was a big West Brom fan. So you see sometimes these early decisions, they're not just about pure scouting, it's personal connections, too.
So at West Brom, he starts to really hone his skills. But then he makes the move to the Manchester City Academy. That's got to be a huge step up in terms of competition, right?
Absolutely. Imagine being surrounded by, some of the most talented young players in the country. Guys like Cole Palmer, Jude Bellingham, names you hear now. They were all there.
Yeah, it's like the all-star team of youth football. Rogers has even had that going to Manchester City was a real gear shift in terms of like tactical understanding. What do you think he meant by that?
Well, West Brom, he probably had a lot of freedom to express himself, to rely on his natural talent. But at City, under Guardiola, the focus is much more on tactical discipline. Playing within a very specific structure, every player has a defined role.
So even with all that raw talent, he had to learn a whole new way of approaching the game?
Yeah, you could say that it's like, think of a musician learning music theory. At first, all those rules and scales might feel restrictive, right? But they actually give you the tools to create something special.
So after Manchester City, Rogers goes on loan to a few different clubs, including Lincoln City. That's where he teamed up with Brennan Johnson, who's, also doing really well now. These loan spells, they seem to be a crucial part of development, especially for young players coming from big academies.
I think they are, definitely. It's that chance to experience real football. You're playing for points every week, adapting to different environments. At Lincoln City, Rogers had a manager, Michael Appleton, who really believed in him, gave him the freedom to play his game. That seems to have been a turning point.
It's interesting because sometimes it's not just about the level you're playing at. It's about finding the right fit. The manager who trusts you, lets you flourish.
Absolutely. And that loan spell, it seems like it created a strong bond between Rogers and Johnson. Even now, they're both playing at higher levels, but they still celebrate each other's successes. It shows you these journeys, they're not always solitary.
Right. Speaking of journeys, Rogers has also represented England at various youth levels. That's got to be a whole other level of pressure and pride.
Oh, for sure. He's even talked about how when he first joined the under-15 squad, he was actually quite nervous. But being around all that talent, some of whom, we know now as big names, it helped him build confidence, helped him refine his game.
It's like a proving ground for the future stars. But even at that level, it sounds like the mental side is just as important as the physical skills.
Absolutely. Even the most gifted players, they've got to learn how to deal with those nerves, that pressure to perform on the big stage.
And that seems to be a theme throughout his career, right? Joining new teams, proving himself in different environments. He's talked about those initial butterflies when he walks into a new locker room, but then how quickly he settles in, especially with the younger players.
Yeah, it's a fascinating glimpse into the dynamics of professional football, isn't it? All these incredibly talented individuals competing for a limited number of spots, but there's also this camaraderie, especially among the younger guys.
And it feels like things are changing a bit, too. Rogers has even mentioned how dressing rooms are getting younger.
Oh, definitely. More and more talented academy graduates are coming through. It's a trend we're seeing across the game.
The emphasis on youth development is paying off. And these young players, they're bringing a different energy.
They're not just content to be there, they're hungry. They want to make their mark.
Which brings us to Rogers' current club, Aston Villa, and his experience playing under Unai Emery. Now, this is where things get really interesting, when we start talking about tactical approaches and player development.
Right, because Emery, he's known for being incredibly detailed, very focused on structure. So for Rogers, it's been a big adjustment, especially coming from environments where he had more freedom to express himself.
There's even that story he's told about Emery pushing him to stick to a specific tactical instruction, even after repeated failed attempts. Talk about commitment to the system.
Yeah, that's Emery. And it raises the question, how does a player like Rodgers, who's known for his individual flair, adapt to a manager like Emery, who's so focused on discipline and structure?
That's the big question. Is this where his time at City under Guardiola comes in?
It could be. Under Guardiola, he learned the importance of positioning, playing within a system, even if it meant sacrificing some of his individual freedom.
So Guardiola's coaching might have actually prepared him for Emery's tactical demands.
It's possible, and Rodgers himself has said that Emery's attention to detail, the emphasis on structure, they've actually helped him improve.
That's fascinating. It almost makes you wonder if this combination of experiences, the freedom at West Brom, the tactical rigor of City, and now this structured approach under Emery, has it created a unique skill set? A blend of creativity and discipline that sets him apart.
That's a really intriguing thought, isn't it? We always talk about finding the right fit, but maybe it's more about accumulating all these different experiences and then synthesizing them into something special.
Like a chef combining ingredients to create a signature dish.
Exactly, and don't forget, Rodgers is still young, he's still evolving. It's going to be fascinating to see how he continues to develop his game in the years to come.
We've talked about his development, in these different systems with all these different coaches. But what about the mental side of things? How does Rodgers handle the pressure of playing at this level?
He seems to have a really good perspective on it, actually. He sees pressure as a positive thing, like a motivator even. He says it can be fun.
So instead of letting it, weigh him down, he uses it to fuel his performance.
Exactly. He embraces the fact that people are watching, that they expect him to deliver. That kind of self-belief, it's crucial for any athlete who wants to reach the top.
Rodgers has talked about his family a lot, how they help him stay grounded. Remember why he started playing in the first place. The love of the game.
That's so important, isn't it? It's easy to get caught up in all the hype, the money, the fame, but at the end of the day, it's that passion that sustains you. That's what keeps you going when things get tough.
And speaking of tough, let's talk about Rodgers' ambition. He was recently ranked 21st among all footballers in Britain, which is, that's pretty impressive company. But he's not satisfied with just being in the top 20. He wants to break into the top 10.
That's the kind of ambition that separates the good from the great. Talent alone isn't enough. You have to have that drive, that hunger to constantly push yourself further.
But how does that ambition, how does that square with his willingness to adapt to these different systems? We've seen him thrive under Guardiola at City, which was so free-flowing, and now under Emery at Villa, which is much more structured.
It's an interesting paradox, isn't it? He's clearly adaptable, he can play in different tactical frameworks, but he's also incredibly ambitious, determined to make his mark on the game. It's a fascinating balance to strike.
It makes you wonder about that tension that sometimes exists between individual expression and the demands of a system. Can you really be a truly great player if you're always conforming to someone else's vision?
That's something that a lot of creative people struggle with, not just in football, but in any field, really. How do you balance your own unique talents with the need to work within a structure, to be part of a team?
And maybe that's the key to Rodgers' success so far. He's found a way to embrace both, He can play within a system, but he also brings his own individual flair to the game.
He's kind of taken the best of both worlds, the tactical discipline of Guardiola, that freedom of expression I had at West Brom, and now the structure and detail of Emery's approach. He's woven it all together to create his own unique style.
It's like he's a chameleon almost, blending into any environment, but still retaining his own distinct identity.
That's a great analogy. And it speaks to how important adaptability has become in the modern game. Football is constantly evolving. Tactics are changing. Players are moving between clubs more than ever before. You have to be able to adjust to new surroundings, new teammates, new coaches if you want to stay at the top of your game.
And Rodgers seems to have mastered that art. He's taken every challenge in stride, from playing with older boys as a kid to adapting to Guardiola and Emery.
And along the way, he's learned something from each experience. It's like he's been on a constant quest for knowledge, always trying to improve.
So going back to that question we started with, is Rodgers a product of his environment, or was he destined for greatness all along?
It's probably a bit of both, to be honest. He's been lucky to have incredible coaches and mentors, people who have helped him develop his talent.
But he's also shown this incredible work ethic, a willingness to learn, a real drive to succeed. And that's something you can't teach.
Absolutely. That combination of talent, opportunity, and sheer determination, that's what makes him such a special player.
It's a good reminder that even in a sport as structured as football, there's still room for individual brilliance.
And that the path to success is rarely a straight line. It's full of twists and turns, unexpected challenges, and, of course, opportunities.
So what's next for Morgan Rodgers?
That's the exciting part, isn't it? We don't know yet, but given everything we've seen so far, I have a feeling it's going to be something special.
It really does feel like we're watching something special unfold here.
And what's so inspiring about Roger's story is that it goes beyond just football. It's about these universal themes: hard work, adaptability, that pursuit of excellence.
It's something anyone can relate to. Doesn't matter if you're an athlete, an artist, an entrepreneur, or just someone, trying to figure things out.
Absolutely.
It brings us back to that question from the beginning. Is Morgan Rogers a product of his environment? Or is he destined for greatness no matter where he plays? What do you think now after really digging into his journey?
I think it's got to be a bit of both, right? He's been incredibly lucky, the opportunities he had, the coaching, the facility.
But he's also made the most of those opportunities. He hasn't just coasted along. He's put in the work, embraced those challenges, and he never stops learning.
And that's what makes him stand out. It's not just the talent, it's the mindset, the drive, that belief in himself.
It's like that saying, right? Hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard.
Exactly. Rogers is a perfect example of that. He proves that we all have the potential to do great things if we put in the effort, embrace the journey, and never give up on those dreams.
This deep dive has been a real eye-opener for me. It's gone way beyond, like, the headlines and the stats. We've gotten to see the human side of this athlete.
And that's what makes it so powerful. We've seen his vulnerabilities, those moments of doubt, but we've also seen his resilience, his determination, and that passion he has for the game.
It's been great to get this glimpse into his world.
It really has, and I think it's given us a lot to think about, not just about football, but about life as a whole.
So before we wrap up, I want to leave you with a question. What's one thing you can take from Rogers' story that you can apply to your own life?
Maybe it's the importance of mentors who believe in you. Maybe it's embracing challenges. Or maybe it's that reminder about the power of hard work and perseverance.
Whatever it is, I hope this deep dive has inspired you to go after your own dreams with the same passion and determination that Morgan Rogers brings to the pitch.
And who knows, maybe one day we'll be doing a deep dive on your success story.
I love that idea. But until then, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.